city. Blind and dirty. Ask me for a dime for a cup of coffee. I got no dime, but I got some time to use story.
The year is 1095. Europe is torn by the constant warring of count against count, lord against lord. The brutal infighting devastates the continent and threatens the very fabric of civilization, which the Church is trying to maintain. In Clermont, France, Pope Urban II addresses a council of peace. His solution? To harness the aggression in Europe for the good of Christianity. He calls for the rescue of Jerusalem from its Muslim rulers. Throughout Europe, the response is overwhelming. The movement this gives rise to will be called the Crusades. The Pope advises the rescuers of Jerusalem to postpone their start until the following year, when they can be properly provisioned. But thousands decide to leave their homes in France, Germany, and England immediately, having been aroused by persuasive preachers. In the spring of 1096, 5 armies totaling 50,000, mostly a ragtag assortment of commoners and foot soldiers, begin marching towards Constantinople, the gateway to the Holy Land.
The Pope was very much surprised by the response that he got to his call. He was expecting a regular army, which mostly meant knights and their retainers. He did not expect mobs to arise and decide to go there, and I don't think that was ever his intention.
Compounding the tragedy, some leaders are anti-Semitic, inflamed by visions of an entirely Christian world.
Groups of knights and crusaders decided, why do we wait till we get to the Holy Land or to Muslim territories to slay the infidel? We have infidel in Europe, and they're the Jews.
Despite the efforts of many local bishops to protect or hide Europe's Jews, thousands are slaughtered by the Crusaders. But more damage is done. With little planning and less in the way of supplies, the Crusaders plunder as they go. By their sheer numbers, they wreak havoc and quickly become hated and feared.
It's like the locusts. It's like an invasion of locusts anywhere. All over Europe, everybody's worried about these people. And you find all kinds of records of people trying to direct them in other directions or to get them across their lands as quickly as possible.
3 of the 5 armies are simply destroyed along the way by angry townspeople who finally fight back. The remaining 2 armies successfully cross Europe and reach Constantinople. There, an anxious emperor quickly ferries them across the Bosphorus River to Asia Minor. Discipline immediately breaks down, and they are massacred by the Turks. The very first crusade is an unmitigated disaster. It will later come to be called the Peasants' Crusade. It is immediately disowned by the Church. In 1096, a second wave of Crusaders starts out for the Holy Land. These are true knights. However, once they get beyond Constantinople, they find themselves surrounded by an enemy in an alien land. Their crusade becomes a trial of starvation, humiliation, and death. But they see this as a test of faith, and their conviction only deepens as a result. In July of 1099, nearly 3 years after they had begun, this second crusade forces its way into Jerusalem. What follows is a slaughter. One crusader, Raymond of Agius, would record the event.
Some of our men, and this was more merciful, cut off the heads of their enemies. Others tortured them longer by casting them into the flames. Piles of heads, hands, and feet were to be seen in the streets of the city. Men rode in blood up to their knees in bridle reins. Indeed, it was a just and splendid judgment of God.
The year is 1202. Jerusalem has been lost to the Muslims. Pope Innocent III, eager to retake the city, calls for another crusade. But after 100 years of ceaseless crusading, Europe is tired.
I think that the Crusades were a complete disaster for Western Christianity. The Crusades were the first cooperative act of the new Europe as she fought her way out of barbarism and became a major world power. But they left hatred and antagonism behind. There was nothing remotely Christian about these disgraceful episodes.
Enter the stage of Christian history a man named Dominic of Guzman. At first, his mission is simply to combat heresy. But while visiting France, Dominic is profoundly disturbed by an attempt to convert a man through force. Returning to his home in Spain, he organizes a group of friars to roam the countryside, preaching. Their mission is a battle for souls. They were to live in poverty, devote themselves to study, and to combat false doctrine by logical argument rather than by the use of force. They will come to be called the Order of Preachers. We know them today as the Dominicans. A story is told of Dominic when he was in Rome, seeking authorization for his order from the Pope Honorius III. While giving Dominic a tour of the treasures of the Roman Church, Honorius quotes Acts of the Apostles 3:6, stating to Dominic, "Peter can no longer say, 'Silver and gold have I none.'" Dominic turns, looks straight at the Pope, and replies, "No, and neither can he say, 'Rise and walk.'" Under this severe exterior beats a gentle heart. On one occasion, he sells his books, annotated in his own hand, to relieve the starving poor. Twice he tries to sell himself into slavery, to raise money to liberate people who are held captive by Spanish Muslims. That while in Rome, Dominic receives a vision of a beggar who, like Dominic, would do great things for the faith. Dominic meets the beggar the next day. Embracing him, Dominic says, "You are my companion and must walk with me. If we hold together, no earthly power can withstand us." The beggar is Saint Francis of Assisi.
Francis is, in my view, the purest example of that wild idea of just dropping what you have and just go out in the wilderness, follow Christ, preach the gospel. Very simple, very straightforward, very crazy, very endearing.
Born the son of a wealthy merchant, he rejects a life of comfort and adopts poverty. At a time when it is believed that riches glorify God, this in itself is revolutionary. But while many may abandon the mainstream to seek simplicity, few have the charisma to draw followers into a great order.
That Francis went to see Pope Innocent III. Now you have to realize Innocent III was the most powerful pope that has ever lived. mean, he had Europe in his hand. And here comes this man dressed in rags, asking that he wants to found a new order. The Pope told him, "You smell like a pig. Go and live among them."
St. Francis proceeds to do just that.
And St. Francis went and found himself a pigsty and sort of rolled in it for a while, and Sunday came back and asked for another audience with the Pope. He said, "Holy Father, I have done as you commanded. Now would you please do as I beg?" And Innocent was so moved that the order began.
Ironically, order is the last thing Francis wants. In the monastic culture of the day, monks adhere strictly to rigid rules and routines. Francis is notoriously disorganized and cannot bring himself to create a set of guidelines for his brotherhood. One thing he does do is set down the whisperings of his heart in prayer.
Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Let me not so much seek to be consoled as to console. Let me not so much seek to be understood as to understand. Let me not so much seek to be loved as to love. Francis of Assisi.
But I'll get back on my feet someday. Good Lord willing, if he says I may, I know that the light I'm living's no good. I'll get a new store. Live the life I should.